Well, welcome to my new series. It's called The Crimes of Tommy Robinson. A number of episodes, all of which are going to be short, and each episode will deal with a different type of crime. And so the first one, for example, is going to be contempt of courts that he's committed, and the next one is going to be fraud and so on. So we're going to go through these crimes, and I'll be using quite a lot from my series, The Real Tommy Robinson, to expose that. But I will, if you like, update it as best I can. So here we are. The very first one, let's look into Tommy Robinson and his contempts of court. In this case, there are a large number of steps outside the court coming down to the pavement-stroke sidewalk. And Tommy was arrested because he stood on the steps to report it. You'll see he had a genuine concern for reporting this because of the current risk being exposed to girls by the conditions of bail. These first two contempt cases are from my series, The Real Tommy Robinson. Tommy has had 3 contempt of court cases. The first one was outside Canterbury Town Court, where he was attempting to film 4 Muslim defendants, accused of raping a 16-year-old girl. As it happens, they all were sent to jail for that rape. Tommy was surprised that given the DNA of all the 4 men had been found on the girl, that they'd be bailed, and were running the same shop that they were running before where they raped the girl. The problem was that other girls were still going into that shop, and so Tommy objected to the bail and he wanted to expose it. He made the mistake of filming on the steps of the court, and to film on court property is against the law and is contempt. However, you will often see reporters reporting on the steps of a court, but with Tommy, it's against the law. But now, let's look at how months later he was arrested for this civil offence.
Your camera's on, that's fine. You're arrested on suspicion of contempt of court on the 8th of the 5th, 2017 at Canterbury Court.
So to be clear, Tommy Robinson in this case was simply pointing out that the bail conditions were allowing young girls to come into contact continually, and he actually had video footage of young girls going in and out of the premises where they had been raped in the past. And don't forget, they were found guilty, the evidence was very clear, and so he was just pointing out the problem with being put on bail. And he was pointing this out to the public, really. So you can judge whether that deserves the sentence he got. Offence number 2. After checking with the policeman that he was not standing on a court property, and by the way, Tommy by this time had taken a course on contempt of court, Tommy set about reporting outside a grooming gang trial because nobody else was covering it. There were no public around except the odd one passing by. He was not breaching any laws at all in this case, but that did not stop his arrest.
The content of what I'm streaming, I'm being arrested for breach of the peace. Are you arresting him? Being arrested for breach of the peace. You've all watched this. You've all watched this. You've all watched this. You've all watched this. Can you get me a solicitor? Can you get me a solicitor?
For you just to turn up.
Yes.
Now turning to the second contempt of court arrest. This was outside Leeds Crown Court, and I'm going to take you through the arrest in chronological order. After him not understanding the law with regards to filming on court property, those steps, Tommy went on a course, a legal course, to understand what contempt is. This taught him, obviously, not to stand anywhere on court property, so he checked with the police locally, there on the spot, that he was not on court property, and secondly it taught him that he could only read out what was already in the public domain. So what he read out was from his phone, and that phone was on the BBC website. So he was reading out already public information. He was not breaching the law, but that did not matter for what followed. The judge spotted him out of the window, broadcasting on his telephone from public land. Not an offence. But he sent the police down to arrest him for a totally trumped-up charge of disturbing the peace. He was standing there by himself with his phone. He wasn't disturbing the peace, and of course they never followed up with that charge. It was just a fake charge to get him off the street. It turned out he was to be jailed within 5 hours of being arrested, and he was jailed for contempt of court. In that proceeding, he was not told what he had said that was wrong. He was not allowed his own lawyer. he was not allowed any mitigation to explain. He was not even asked whether he wanted to plead guilty or not guilty. It did not matter. He was going to go to jail within that 5 hours. He was also denied full access to his appeal lawyers. These are facts as listed by the Court of Appeal when they granted him a new trial. Tommy was jailed on a Friday, and there was a bank holiday Monday following that Friday, so the court convened again on the Tuesday when the defence lawyers of that grooming gang claimed that Tommy had prejudiced the trial. But the judge and the CPS had over the weekend actually seen what Tommy had transmitted and confirmed that there was no prejudicial statements issued by Tommy. Tommy Robinson did not prejudice the trial, but that judge still left him in jail. When the judge had Tommy's statement with all these facts in that retrial, he referred the matter up to the Attorney General. This, of course, only came out much later, after the Court of Appeal granted Tommy a retrial. Because the fact is that the state had totally mucked this up. So with Tommy in jail, this went to appeal, and the appeal court released him immediately and cleared up all those points. They accepted all those points. This was a total travesty of justice, completely. But it then was referred up to the Attorney General, who arranged another trial. Now, I want to point something out here very clearly. What Tommy was doing outside Leeds Court was commenting from and quoting from the BBC Public Information website. He actually made a video saying he can't release the full details. He can't do that because he has to wait 6 months, because that trial's linked to another trial. There's 2 or 3 trials going on, and he couldn't release that. All he could give you was public information. He did approach some of the defendants going into court because the trial was over. This is really important. The trial was over. It was a sentencing session. So they were being sentenced. So he was saying things, have you got your prison bag there ready, etc. And he was fairly polite. But in Britain, our reporters and the mainstream media stand all the time around defendants going into court. This defendant, I'm going to show you now, is a very big public figure from the BBC, the sort of commentator who covers the Queen's funeral and so on, very famous, highly paid person, and he was guilty of child pornography, having photographs of despicable things being done to young children. Yes, and he actually pleaded guilty to this. And so as he was going in for sentencing, etc., there were lots of comments right in his face from reporters. But Tommy's not allowed to do that. It's one rule for one and another rule for Tommy. And Tommy's in a unique class of his own for the rules they allow on him. So that's where we are there. And here is just a clip of what is normal in outside court.
Do you have anything you want to say this morning before the court appearance, Mr. Edwards?
How are you feeling?
Get back! Space, please.
Right, get back.
Go this way.
How are you feeling, Mr.
Thank you very much.
So all Tommy was doing was what the reporters do, and he was asking people who'd already been found guilty and waiting sentence and going in to be sentenced, just like that famous broadcaster there was going to be sentenced, asking them questions, as it were. And there was no trouble. There were no other people around, and the case was over. And don't forget, completely clear that he hadn't interfered with the trial. Who by? By the CPS and by the judge themselves. They had not interfered with the trial in any way, but they were determined to get him. So what happened then after the Attorney General came back at him and got a new trial, even after all those injustices I've just listed, which the appeal court agreed on? So there was a retrial, and this is what the result was. And this is, I'm quoting this officially, I'll read it out for you. Tommy Robinson faces jail after being found in contempt of court by High Court judges for filming defendants in a criminal trial and broadcasting the footage on social media. The 2 senior judges, and by the way, Tommy's never been tried by a jury, the 2 senior judges found the former English Defence League leader, whose real name is Stephen Yaxley Lennon, was in contempt when he filmed defendants accused of sexual exploitations of young girls and live-streamed the footage in breach of reporting ban outside the Leeds Crown Court in May 2018. But he wasn't reporting other than what was in the public domain already. Robinson denied any wrongdoing, saying he did not believe he was breaching reporting restrictions and only referred to information that was already in the public domain, which he did. But Dame Victoria Sharp sitting at the Old Bailey with Mr. Justice Warby. And by the way, notice this little incident goes all the way to the highest court in the land, if you like, the Old Bailey, you know, the big one in London, right? But Dame Victoria Sharp sitting at the Old Bailey with Mr. Justice Warby found him in contempt in 3 respects. She said he breached the reporting restrictions imposed on the trial by live streaming the video from outside the public entrance to the court and by aggressively confronting and filming some of the defendants. What he did was he asked questions like, have you got your prison bag with you, etc. They were going in to be sentenced. They'd already been found guilty. And now we come to the next remainder of that, which is here. The judge said that the content of the video gave rise to substantial risk that the course of justice in that case would be seriously impeded. How? Tell me how. They were already guilty. They were going in to be sentenced. The actual judge said what Tommy did didn't interfere. The CPS said what Tommy did didn't interfere. And you know, but it's still there. And the confrontation of defendants was a direct interference with the course of justice. Well, then so it would be for almost every other high-profile case in Britain, where, as I've just showed you, reporters often ask pertinent questions of the defendants going in, especially for sentencing. And she added, in our judgment, the respondents' conduct in each of those respects amounted to serious interference with the administration of justice. Just to be clear, Robinson correctly stated shortly before that arrest, on the 25th of May 2018, I won't be able to share the full video with you until the reporting restrictions are lifted, and I don't think that'll be possibly for another 6 months. He was complying with the law. Tommy's third offence then was this showing of the film Silenced. And he showed it knowing he would go to jail, knowing there was no chance of justice in his case, because the way he's always treated. He's arrested for having breakfast with his kids as a disturbance of the peace, when you know everyone around is just shattered by the fact he's just sitting there quietly. So there's no chance of justice for Tommy Robinson because he's the third layer of injustice. We talk about 2-tier Starmer. We've had 3-tier justice for Tommy ever since he started. So I'm not going to go into detail on the film Silence. It started with a sprinkling of less than a cupful of water over a child in a playground. But that's all so well detailed in the film Silence that's been watched now by, I understand, 153 million people. So I don't need to expand on that. And that's what he's in jail for now. Not just in jail, but in solitary confinement. And the reason for that is for his safety. But it's still torture. And I'm sure Tommy and the authorities could arrange an open prison for him for this, which is more akin to the civil offence. How many people, for the offence of contempt of court, are put into a high security prison? How many people are transferred from a prison in which he was getting on okay and was safe to another prison where there's a high concentration of Muslims and he wasn't safe? How many prisoners are shoved into rooms with 5 of his enemies, into cells with 5 of his enemies, and then left, so he gets really belted to pieces and loses his teeth? That's Tommy Robinson. And for those watching from overseas, I'm British. Actually, I'm half American as well, but my father was from Texas. I never met him, by the way, but he was from Texas. I'm a war baby. But we don't have justice in Britain. We don't have freedom of speech anymore. I'm ashamed to say that. And I'll go down in flames on this issue. But that's what we don't have that. So there's the end of this. I'm going to leave it for you to watch the film Silenced. But this is the end of the Contempt series. The next one we're going to deal with is fraud. Tommy Robinson's fraud. And yeah, I think you'll be equally surprised at that case. That'll be a much shorter video because there's only one story to tell. So until the next one in this series, out not too long, there's a whole series. I'll cover every single crime he's ever committed. And, you can see and judge for yourselves. That's all this is about. Please judge for yourselves. Don't be convinced by me. You've seen the evidence, then make the judgments. Thank you for watching.